General Hospital will reveal exciting events in the next 2 weeks from May 5 to May 16, 2025. First, the tranquil spring nights in Port Charles were shattered by a series of events that unraveled unexpectedly during what was supposed to be a harmless bonfire gathering. What began as youthful excitement under the stars quickly turned into a breeding ground for danger when Cody, ever the reluctant hero, stumbled upon signs of trouble. His instincts kicked in the moment he noticed underage teens acting erratically and the unmistakable scent of alcohol lingering in the air. With swift urgency, Cody contacted Dante. Knowing that one of the individuals caught in the recklessness was Rocco, Dante's own son. The betrayal of trust hit Dante hard. To learn that Rocco, not yet of legal age, had not only consumed alcohol but had been lured into a college party atmosphere by none other than Danny was an unforgivable shock. The overwhelming mix of rage, fear, and disappointment in Dante ignited a firestorm that was about to engulf his family. Meanwhile, the fallout spread quickly to Jason, who received word that his son Danny had played a major role in enticing Rocco to attend the party. With his past steeped in mistakes he can never erase, Jason refused to let Danny spiral down a similar path. Determined to correct his son's course before it veered too far off track, Jason confronted the situation head-on. He didn't raise his voice, but the gravity in his gaze and the weight of his words left no doubt about the seriousness of the offense. The disappointment was palpable. Jason understood that this wasn't merely a lapse in teenage judgment, it was a potentially life-altering misstep that needed to be addressed with firm consequences. He demanded accountability. Not just for Rocco's sake, but for Danny's own future, for the kind of man he hoped his son would still become. As authorities began to investigate the situation further, the potential legal implications loomed large. Underage drinking alone was enough to raise alarms. But the suspicion that someone had brought and distributed alcohol at the event made the situation even more serious. Names started circulating, and among them was Gio, a rising star in the music program at PCU. Known for his talent and discipline, Gio was the last person anyone expected to be caught in such a scandal. But association was enough to make him a person of interest. With the prospect of being handcuffed in public, his academic career, his reputation, and everything he had built teetered on the edge of ruin. What no one yet knew was the cruel irony waiting to explode, if Dante were the one to make the arrest. It would mean a father unknowingly placing cuffs on his own son. Lois was among the first to sense the danger approaching her child. The mere thought of Gio being publicly humiliated, or worse, facing criminal charges, sent her into a spiral of dread. She rushed to Dante in desperation, her voice trembling as she pleaded for understanding, for discretion, for mercy. She knew Gio had made mistakes, what teenager hadn't? But she also knew the weight of the world was bearing down on a boy who had no idea of the storm gathering around him. In Lois's heart, there was more than maternal panic, there was guilt for never telling Gio the truth about his father, for never allowing Dante a chance to guide him before he veered into darkness. She could feel time slipping away, each second bringing the threat of a scandal that could forever fracture their already fragile family. For Dante, the moment was one of the most conflicted of his life. As a detective, he had sworn to uphold the law, to treat every case with objectivity and fairness. But as a man, as a father, though unknowingly so, he felt the foundation of his principles begin to tremble. He had always believed in justice. But justice felt cruel when it demanded he destroy a boy who might carry his blood. The truth loomed at the edge of revelation, its weight suffocating. Dante began to recall subtle clues, mannerisms, and resemblances that now took on new meaning. Could the boy he was prepared to arrest be his son? Could the badge he wore become the weapon that severed a bond he never even had the chance to form? The questions haunted him as he stared at the paperwork on his desk, unsure whether his duty would lead him to salvation or to unforgivable damage. And amid all this chaos, Cody remained an outsider looking in, but not without concern. He had done what he believed was right, intervening to protect the child from harm. Yet the cascading effects of his actions were now shaking the very core of a family that didn't even know it was broken. He watched Lois's frantic efforts to protect her son, Dante's internal war between law and blood, and Joe's oblivious calm before the storm. A choice made in good conscience had triggered a chain of events no one could stop. What began as a simple warning to a friend was now unraveling into a tragedy of identity, accountability, and hidden truths. In the days to come, the truth about Joe's parentage would inevitably surface, but whether it would come in time to prevent his fall, or repair what had already been broken, remained uncertain. Second, in the aftermath of mounting tensions, Christina found herself at a crossroads between fury and forgiveness. After a heartfelt conversation with Lucky, whose insight into family struggles had long been shaped by his own turbulent past, Christina began to reconsider her approach toward the rift with Alexis. The discovery of damning legal documents that could incriminate her had pushed Christina to the edge, yet Lucky's advice echoed in her mind like a steady current, reminding her that resolution sometimes required surrendering the need to be right. In that spirit, Christina braced herself to extend an olive branch, prepared to let go of the charges if it meant healing a deeper familial wound. What she didn't know, however, was that Alexis had been quietly keeping a more insidious secret, one that involved Ava and a blackmail scheme that could destroy the fragile foundation Christina was trying to rebuild. Alexis, still bearing the burden of her own demons, chose silence over confession, risking a second, more devastating fallout if the truth ever surfaced. Meanwhile, Nina's carefully orchestrated plan to expose Willow and eliminate Drew from the picture had crumbled spectacularly. What began as a calculated maneuver fell apart the moment Willow believed Drew's version of events, especially after the ketamine was confirmed in his toxicology report. The credibility Drew regained through medical evidence left Nina reeling, forcing her to accept that her manipulations were no match for Willow's growing loyalty to Drew. Worse yet, Drew himself had begun to connect dots that pointed dangerously close to Tracy. The memory of her veiled threats just before he blacked out now rang alarm bells. Though Tracy was infamous for her power plays and cryptic warnings, few could have predicted she'd be involved in something as direct, and illegal, as drugging Drew. As Drew deepened his inquiry, he unknowingly stepped into a maze where every path was lined with deception and each wrong turn could derail him permanently. Despite his resolve, the question loomed. Was Drew getting closer to the truth, or being led astray by someone manipulating the evidence behind the scenes? The investigation surged with intensity, and Drew found himself navigating treacherous waters. Each clue uncovered seemed to generate more questions than answers, and the shadows surrounding Tracy only grew darker. While Drew was fueled by righteous anger and a desire to protect those he cared about, he was up against adversaries skilled in diversion and concealment. Nina and Portia, both desperate to avoid being implicated, began to coordinate efforts in secret, sharing nervous whispers and barely contained panic as they erased traces that could tie them to the crime. Portia, caught between medical ethics and maternal instincts, knew that any misstep could lead to irreversible consequences, especially if Willow began to suspect that the people closest to her were lying. Her subtle probing during conversations with Willow became a dangerous dance, one that teetered between curiosity and manipulation. Every time Willow let slip a detail about Drew or Tracy, Portia logged it away with clinical precision, all while hiding her own sense of dread that the house of cards was about to collapse. Amid the spiraling chaos, Brad found himself staring into a mirror of his past, one riddled with deception, betrayal, and bad decisions. For once, he felt the weight of conscience pressing harder than ambition. The deal he was being pushed toward, one that involved Selena Wu's ruthless empire, promised power but at the cost of his soul. Yet Portia's influence, perhaps unexpectedly, had begun to shift his moral compass. In her, Brad saw a woman fighting desperately to maintain order in a world unraveling. Her quiet strength and unwavering belief in second chances sparked something in him, something that long lay dormant beneath years of manipulation. It became increasingly clear that Brad no longer wanted to be the pawn in someone else's game. As he stood on the edge of a life-changing decision, the question no longer was whether he should deceive Selena, but whether he had the courage to stand against her. The price of disobedience would be steep. But the price of staying in the shadows might cost him everything he had left of himself. Back in Nina's world, frustration mounted like a storm. She had played the long game, orchestrated every move with precision, yet still found herself cornered by truth and betrayal. Crossing paths with Curtis only added fuel to her resentment. He too had grievances with Drew and wasn't shy about voicing them. As they shared their mutual disdain for Drew's uncanny ability to escape consequences, they found brief solace in their shared bitterness. Yet beneath the surface, both Nina and Curtis knew that their complaints were hollow distractions from the reality that they were losing control. Curtis, whose own world had been turned upside down more than once, understood better than anyone that holding on to resentment only delayed healing. But Nina wasn't ready for redemption. Not yet. She still harbored hope that the game wasn't over, that there was another move to be made, another secret to uncover, another ally to exploit. As far as she was concerned, the war with Drew wasn't lost. It was merely paused. In the days to come, Port Charles would see alliances fracture, secrets unearthed, and the thin veil of civility torn away. Christina's fragile truce with Alexis could be shattered the moment Ava's blackmail is exposed. Drew's investigation might either bring justice or turn dangerously toward the wrong target. Nina, unwilling to accept defeat, could plunge deeper into manipulation, dragging others with her. Brad's fate would hang in the balance, torn between liberation and loyalty. And all the while, Portia's careful web of silence might begin to unravel, strand by strand. The consequences would be swift, the betrayals unforgettable, and the scars permanent. In Port Charles, no truth stays buried forever. Third, tensions in Port Charles are once again ready to explode. This time fueled by an unexpected confrontation between two women who were once allies but are now walking very different paths. When Sasha crosses paths with Willow, years of unspoken grievances and unresolved emotions bubble to the surface. What starts as a chance encounter quickly escalates into a heated exchange. The cordial restraint that once existed between them vanishes as Willow challenges Sasha's recent decisions, questioning her sincerity and stability. But Sasha, having endured loss, addiction, and betrayal, is no longer the fragile woman she once was. She meets Willow's judgment with fierce resilience, unwilling to be treated as someone who needs saving. The clash, rooted in deeper emotional wounds and misunderstandings, sends shockwaves through their social circle and forces both women to confront their own roles in the unraveling of their friendship. Meanwhile, Jocelyn is wrestling with the consequences of a misstep that could have long-lasting implications. After going to great lengths to retrieve a USB drive for Emma, Jocelyn is hit with the guilt of having compromised the very data Emma had worked so hard to gather. The damage to the drive, whether accidental or not, represents more than just lost information. It symbolizes a breach of trust and a setback in a mission far greater than Jocelyn had anticipated. Yet, despite the weight of her mistake, Jocelyn refuses to be derailed. She steels herself for the next phase of her mission, determined to prove her worth as a research assistant in a world where loyalty and precision mean everything. The stakes rise when Brennan summons her and Vaughn to a covert meeting, signaling that their roles are about to become far more complicated than they imagined. Within the shadows of this secret gathering, truths begin to surface. Jocelyn and Vaughn, each navigating their own moral gray zones, are startled by revelations concerning Professor Dalton, a man cloaked in mystery and power. They learn that the WSB's interest in Dalton isn't merely academic or political. There's something buried beneath his charming exterior, something the agency is desperate to expose. For Jocelyn, this discovery reframes everything she thought she knew about her task. What began as an ambitious internship has now morphed into a dangerous investigation with implications far beyond the walls of any laboratory. As she and Vaughn dig deeper, they're forced to question their handlers, their loyalties, and whether they're truly working for justice, or being used as pawns in a larger scheme. Elsewhere, Sidwell enters the fray with a proposal that reeks of risk. Ever the smooth operator, he presents his deal as an opportunity too good to pass up, but those familiar with his track record know better. Behind every one of Sidwell's offers lies a trap, a debt, or a betrayal waiting to detonate. Despite this, he's persuasive, targeting a vulnerable but ambitious player in the Port Charles game with a promise of power, influence, or financial freedom. The temptation is undeniable, especially for someone who feels cornered or disillusioned by their current path. But the cost of shaking Sidwell's hand has ruined more than a few reputations. And those who choose to sign on may find themselves unable to escape once the ink is dry. As these storylines interweave, the sense of danger across Port Charles deepens. Sasha's explosive encounter with Willow may seem personal on the surface, but it carries the weight of a deeper shift in alliances. Jocelyn's stumble with the USB drive is only the beginning of her descent into a shadow war, one that could cost her more than just a job. The secrets surrounding Dalton hint at a corruption that could undermine the very agencies claiming to uphold justice. And Sidwell, always lurking with a smile and a contract, serves as a reminder that power in Port Charles often comes at a price too steep to measure. With every passing day, loyalties will be tested, secrets will be weaponized. And the choices these characters make could determine whether they rise, fall, or disappear entirely. Finally, the week of May 12 to May 16 in Port Charles promises to be one of emotional upheaval and rising tension, as several long-brewing storylines reach a critical turning point. For Kai, the days leading up to his surgery were filled with tentative hope, supported by the belief that medical science and sheer determination might give him a second chance at life. Despite his calm exterior, Kai clung to optimistic projections and reassurances from his surgical team. However, the moment of truth arrives when he awakens post-operation to a devastating realization: the procedure may not have gone as planned. The flicker of sensation in his lower limbs is gone. The once manageable pain has given way to a terrifying numbness. The brutal possibility of paralysis now looms large, leaving Kai in emotional freefall as he begins to understand what this could mean for his independence, his future, and his sense of self. What was once a journey toward recovery has become a descent into despair. And the medical team must now navigate the heartbreaking task of delivering harsh realities to a man who had every reason to believe his life was about to change for the better. Elsewhere in town, the fallout from the drugging scandal continues to ripple through the social and political layers of Port Charles. Drew, now more determined than ever to uncover the full scope of what happened to him, pushes forward with his private investigation. While he maintains the appearance of control, his suspicions run deep, particularly toward Nina and, increasingly, Portia. The trail of evidence is thin but compelling enough for Drew to suspect that these two women, both deeply embedded in the fabric of the hospital and its surrounding institutions, may have conspired in ways more sinister than previously imagined. Nina's veneer of calm sophistication is beginning to crack as whispers of her potential involvement circulate in hushed tones, and Portia, caught between loyalty and fear, may soon find herself cornered. The community's patience is wearing thin, and Drew knows that the longer the truth remains hidden, the more damage it will do, to reputations, to families, and to justice itself. Despite his quest for truth, Drew himself is no innocent. His past manipulations, veiled threats, and tendency to spin narratives for his own gain have not gone unnoticed. To some, Drew's aggressive pursuit of his attackers feels less like a search for justice and more like a calculated campaign to reclaim dominance. Allies are beginning to question his motives, especially as the evidence against Nina and Portia remains circumstantial at best. The very tactics Drew uses to expose others, surveillance, coercion, and strategic leaks, are the same methods that earned him his reputation as a master manipulator. If he wants to truly clear his name and expose the real culprits, he'll have to tread carefully. For the line between truth and personal vendetta is razor thin. One wrong move could unravel everything, leaving Drew not as the hero of his own story, but as the architect of another Port Charles scandal. On the other side of the Atlantic, a quiet question lingers that could upend assumptions and shift allegiances. Despite what some have believed, Michael never explicitly denied Willow's desire to visit him in Germany. The miscommunication, intentional or otherwise, now calls into question whether Drew had a role in obstructing their reunion. Willow, confused and hurt by the silence, may have accepted Drew's explanation at face value, but others are less convinced. A simple phone call to Jason or Carly could untangle the truth, revealing either an innocent misunderstanding or a deeply calculated move. Jason, with his unshakable loyalty and forensic intuition, is unlikely to let such a possibility go unexamined. If he senses even the slightest hint of sabotage, particularly from someone in his own circle, he won't hesitate to act, quietly at first, but with force if necessary. Yet Jason's focus is divided, pulled in several directions by the complex web of responsibility that defines his life. With Danny's recent behavior raising red flags and the ever-looming threat against Sonny still unresolved, Jason must prioritize what, and who, needs protecting most. His instincts tell him the danger to Sonny is closer than anyone realizes, and Jason has no intention of letting his guard down. The mysterious enemy threatening Sonny's empire operates from the shadows, striking surgically and with precision. Each attempt on Sonny's territory sends a message, and Jason is determined to decode it before the next blow falls. But the deeper he digs, the clearer it becomes that this is no ordinary turf war. Something far more personal and dangerous is at play. And it will take all of Jason's skill and resolve to root it out. As these storylines tighten around each other like threads in a fraying net, Port Charles moves closer to another reckoning. Kai's medical tragedy could become a rallying point or a breaking one, depending on how he copes with the new reality of his body. Drew's pursuit of justice may either expose a conspiracy or reveal the darker corners of his own ambition. Nina and Portia's secrets are under siege, and their next moves will determine whether they can maintain their positions, or fall from grace entirely. Michael's silence, Willow's confusion, and Jason's divided attention all converge toward a single truth. In a town where nothing stays hidden forever, even the smallest lie can ignite a firestorm. The only question left is who will survive it.